The arrival. The sleek iridescent halls of the Galactic University of Sciences buzzed with a cacophony of alien languages as students from across the cosmos shuffled to their classes. Amidst the sea of tentacles, antennae, and various appendages, a solitary human strode purposefully, her footsteps echoing distinctly against the metallic floor. Zara Chen, the first human exchange student at GUS, clutched her datapad tightly, her eyes wide with wonder as she took in the sights around her. Holographic signs flickered in a myriad of languages, pointing the way to various departments and lecture halls. The air was thick with a mixture of atmospheric conditions, carefully calibrated to accommodate the diverse needs of the student body. As Zara approached her first class, Xenobiology 101, she couldn't help but feel a mixture of excitement and trepidation. She dreamed of this moment since she was a child, watching the first alien ships descend to Earth. Now here she was, about to learn about the intricacies of extraterrestrial life forms firsthand. The door to the lecture hall slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a room filled with beings of all shapes and sizes. Some floated in anti-gravity bubbles, others were encased in exoskeletons, and a few seemed to be nothing more than shimmering fields of energy. At the front of the class stood, or rather, undulated, Professor Xylov, a Mercurian polymorph whose body rippled with colors as it spoke. "Ah, you must be our Terran exchange student," Professor Xylov burbled, its voice a melodious tone that seemed to resonate within Zora's mind rather than her ears. "Welcome to Xenobiology 101. Please, take a seat." Zara nodded, scanning the room for an empty spot. She found one next to a willowy creature with translucent skin, through which she could see a complex network of pulsating organs. As she sat down, the creature leaned away slightly, its skin taking on a faint purplish hue. "Don't mind Glicks," whispered a voice to her left. Zara turned to see a small, furry being with multiple eyes blinking at her. "They're just nervous. We've all heard stories about humans." "Stories?" Zara asked, raising an eyebrow. "What kind of stories?" The furry alien, who introduced himself as Zook, chittered softly. "You know, about how you're from a death world. How you can survive things that would kill most species instantly. Some say you even eat poison for fun." Zara stifled a laugh. "You mean like spicy food? That's hardly poison." Her words were cut off as Professor Xylov began the lecture, its body morphing into various shapes to illustrate different alien anatomies. Zara found herself utterly fascinated, scribbling notes furiously as the professor described the intricate respiratory systems of gaseous beings from Jupiter's moons and the photosynthetic processes of crystalline life forms from distant nebulae. As the class progressed, Zara noticed her fellow students shooting curious glances her way. Some seemed fascinated, others wary. She tried to focus on the lecture, but couldn't help feeling like a specimen under a microscope. Towards the end of the class, Professor Xylov announced, "For our next session, we'll be conducting a practical experiment on cellular respiration. Each of you will be analyzing samples from your own species to compare and contrast different metabolic processes." A ripple of excitement passed through the class. Zara felt a surge of pride. Finally, a chance to show her classmates that humans weren't as scary as they thought. She raised her hand. "Yes, Student Chen." Professor Xylov's central eye focused on her. "Professor, I was wondering if I could demonstrate the experiment for the class. I think it might help everyone understand that human biology isn't as dangerous as they've heard." A hush fell over the room. Professor Xylov's colors shifted rapidly, a sign of deep thought. "That's an interesting proposal, Student Chen, but I'm not sure our equipment is calibrated for Terran biology." The risk factors. "Oh, it's really quite simple," Zara interrupted, her enthusiasm getting the better of her. "We did similar experiments in my high school back on Earth. I could even show you how we extract DNA using household items." The silence in the room deepened. Glicks, the translucent being next to her, had turned an alarming shade of white. Zook's fur stood on end, and several other students were emitting distress pheromones. Professor Xyloth's form solidified into a rigid shape, a clear sign of stress. Student Chen, while your enthusiasm is commendable, I must insist that we follow standard safety protocols. Perhaps we can discuss this further after class. Zara nodded, deflated but not defeated. As the class ended and students began to file out, giving her a wide berth, she approached the professor's desk. "I'm sorry if I overstepped, Professor. I just thought it might help if they could see that humans aren't as scary as they think." Professor Xyloth's form softened slightly. "I understand your intentions, Student Chen. But you must understand, to many species here, Terrans are, well, terrifying. Your ability to survive in extreme conditions, your rapid healing, your diverse diet, these things are the stuff of nightmares for some." Zara frowned. "But that's exactly why I want to demonstrate. If they could see how our cells work, maybe they'd understand." "Perhaps," the professor interrupted gently, "but change takes time. For now, let's focus on you learning about other species. Understanding goes both ways, after all." As Zara left the classroom, her mind was whirling with ideas. She was determined to find a way to bridge the gap between herself and her alien classmates. Little did she know, her opportunity would come sooner, and in a far more dramatic fashion than she could have ever imagined. The experiment gone wrong. The next week found Zara back in the xenobiology lab, her excitement barely contained. Despite Professor Xyloth's reservations, she had managed to convince him to allow her to participate in the cellular respiration experiment alongside her classmates. The professor had agreed, but only under strict supervision and with additional safety measures in place. The lab was a marvel of alien technology. Holographic displays flickered with real-time data, and strange machines hummed with energy. Each student had their own workstation, customized to their unique biology. Zara's station, however, was surrounded by a shimmering force field, a precaution that made her roll her eyes. "All right, class," Professor Xyloth began, its body a swirl of cautious yellows and greens. "Today, we'll be examining the cellular respiration processes of various species. Please follow the instructions on your datapads carefully. And remember, safety first." Zara glanced at her alien classmates. Glix, the translucent being, was carefully extracting a glowing droplet from one of their organs. Zook, the furry multi-eyed creature, was breathing into a collection chamber. Others were performing equally exotic procedures that Zara could barely comprehend. Taking a deep breath, Zara picked up the sterilized swab provided. "Here goes nothing," she muttered, swabbing the inside of her cheek. She placed the sample in the analyzer, feeling a twinge of nervousness as the machine began to hum. For a few moments, everything seemed normal. The holographic display above her station began to show the intricate dance of her cellular structures. Zara smiled, relieved that the experiment was going smoothly. Then, without warning, alarms began to blare. Red lights flashed across the lab as a computerized voice announced, "Warning, anomalous biological activity detected. Containment protocols engaged." Panic erupted in the lab. Glix's body turned completely transparent, a defensive reaction. Zook's fur puffed out to twice its normal size, and several of the gaseous students condensed into tight, quivering balls. Everyone remained calm. Professor Xyloth's voice cut through the chaos, its body a riot of alarmed reds and oranges. "Student Chen, please step away from your station." Zara backed away, her hands raised. "I don't understand," she said, her voice shaking. "It's just a normal human cell sample." The force field around her station intensified, creating a visible bubble. The analyzer continued to beep frantically, its display showing rapid cellular movements that even Zara found surprising. Professor Xyloth approached cautiously, its form stretching to peer at the display without getting too close. "By the cosmic void," it muttered. "I've never seen cellular activity like this. The metabolic rate, the mitochondrial density, it's off the charts." Zara's confusion turned to fascination. "Really? But that's normal for us. Human cells are pretty efficient, especially when it comes to energy production. A collective gasp went through the room. Zook, who had been inching closer despite his obvious fear, squeaked, "You mean your cells always work this hard? How do you not combust?" Before Zara could answer, the lab doors slid open, admitting a squad of security drones. Their metallic voices rang out in unison. "Potential biohazard detected. All non-essential personnel must evacuate immediately." The alien students didn't need to be told twice. They rushed for the exits, some leaving scorch marks on the floor in their haste. Within moments, only Zara, Professor Xyloth, and the security drones remained. "This is ridiculous," Zara protested, watching as one of the drones began to encase her workstation in a containment bubble. "It's just a cheek swab. We're not dealing with some deadly pathogen here." Professor Xyloth's colors had settled into a worried purple. "I understand your frustration, Student Chen, but you have to see this from our perspective. Your cellular activity. It's unlike anything in our databases. The energy output alone is comparable to some of our most volatile power sources." Zora blinked, a mix of pride and exasperation washing over her. "But that's what I've been trying to tell you. Humans are adaptable. Our cells work hard because they have to. We come from a world that demanded it." One of the security drones interrupted, its sensors focused on Zara. "Scan complete. Subject displays elevated internal temperature and unusual electromagnetic signature. Recommend immediate quarantine for further study." "Oh no," Zara said, backing away. "I am not becoming some lab rat just because your machines can't handle a little human biology. Professor, please, you have to explain to them." Professor Xyloth wavered, its form rippling with indecision. I'm not sure I can, Student Chen. The protocols for unknown biological entities are very clear." Frustration boiled over in Zara. With a swift motion that startled everyone in the room, she reached out and grabbed a nearby beaker filled with a glowing liquid. "Student Chen, don't," Professor Xyloth cried out, but it was too late. Zara downed the contents of the beaker in one gulp. The room fell into shocked silence. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Zora's skin began to glow faintly, and she felt a strange tingling sensation throughout her body. "Huh," she said, looking at her hands. "Tastes like mint. Little tingly." The security drones went haywire, their sensors overloading with new data. Professor Xyloth's form had frozen in a state of utter disbelief. That was a highly concentrated nutrient solution designed for radiant species, the professor finally managed to say. "It should have caused severe radiation poisoning in most life forms." Zara shrugged, the glow already starting to fade from her skin. "Guess humans are tougher than you thought. Now, can we please call off this quarantine nonsense and get back to the actual learning?" As if in answer, the lab's main computer suddenly sparked, smoke rising from its circuits. The containment fields flickered and died, and the security drones slumped, deactivated. In the ensuing silence, broken only by the fizzle of fried electronics, Professor Xyloth's body slowly shifted to a color Zora hadn't seen before, a mix of awe, fear, and respect. "Perhaps," the professor said slowly, "we have much more to learn about Terran biology than I initially thought. Student Chen, I believe we're going to need a much more comprehensive study plan." Zara couldn't help but grin. It wasn't exactly how she planned to break the ice with her alien classmates, but it was a start. As the emergency systems finally kicked in, spraying the lab with decontamination foam, she realized her time at the Galactic University of Sciences was going to be far more interesting than she'd ever imagined. Little did she know, her impromptu demonstration was just the beginning of a series of events that would challenge everything the galactic community thought they knew about humans and test Zara's own understanding of her place in the universe. Campus-wide panic. News of the human biological incident spread through the Galactic University of Sciences faster than a quantum entanglement message. By the time Zara managed to wash off the last of the decontamination foam and change into a fresh uniform, the entire campus was abuzz with wild rumors and speculation. As she stepped out of her dormitory the next morning, Zara found herself in the center of a rapidly widening circle of empty space. Alien students scurried away, their various appendages and sensory organs twitching with barely concealed fear. Some brave souls watched from a distance, their curiosity warring with their instinct for self-preservation. "Great," Zara muttered to herself. "So much for making friends." She made her way to the central courtyard, where a large holographic display usually showed campus announcements and news. Today, it was flashing an urgent message. "Attention all students and faculty. Due to recent events, the Xenobiology department will be closed for decontamination. All classes are suspended until further notice. Please remain calm and avoid contact with any unidentified biological materials." Zara groaned. This was getting out of hand. She needed to find Professor Goxilov and sort this mess out before things got even worse. As she turned to head towards the faculty offices, a familiar chittering voice called out, "Zara, over here." To her surprise, she saw Zook waving, or at least waving several of his many limbs, from behind a glowing energy barrier. Next to him stood Glix, their translucent body cycling through a kaleidoscope of worried colors. Zara approached cautiously. "Zook, Glix, what's going on?" Zook's multiple eyes blinked rapidly. "They've quarantined the entire xenobiology class. Said we might be contaminated by exposure to your cells." Glix's body rippled with agitation. "Is it true? Are your biological processes really so volatile?" Zara sighed, running a hand through her hair in frustration. "No, of course not. Well, I mean, yes, human cells are pretty efficient, but we're not walking biohazards or anything. This is all just a." Zara sighed, running a hand through her hair in frustration. "No, of course not. Well, I mean, yes, human cells are pretty efficient, but we're not walking biohazards or anything. This is all just a big misunderstanding." Just then, a shrill alarm began to sound across the campus. Holographic displays flickered to life, showing the stern face of Dean Zorlax, a being composed entirely of pulsating plasma contained within a crystalline exoskeleton. "Attention all students and faculty," the dean's voice boomed. "This is not a drill. We have detected anomalous energy readings emanating from the Xenobiology department. As a precautionary measure, we are implementing full quarantine protocols. All non-essential personnel must evacuate to designated safe zones immediately." Chaos erupted in the courtyard. Students of various species began to panic, some literally melting into puddles of goo, others taking to the air on wings or anti-gravity units. Security drones zipped through the air, herding confused and frightened aliens towards glowing safe zones. "This is insane," Zara muttered, watching the pandemonium unfold. She turned back to Zook and Glix. "Look, I need to find Professor Dvailov and sort this out. You guys stay here, okay? I'll come back for you." Before her alien classmates could protest, Zara took off running towards the Xenobiology building. As she approached, she saw it was surrounded by a shimmering force field, with more security drones patrolling the perimeter. "Hey," she shouted, waving her arms to get their attention. "I need to speak to Professor Xylov. This is all just a misunderstanding." The drones swiveled to face her, their sensors glowing ominously. "Halt, Terran," one of them intoned. "You are classified as a potential biohazard. Please submit yourself for containment and study." "Oh, come on," Zara groaned. She glanced around, looking for any way to get past the drones. Her eyes fell on a nearby maintenance hatch, partially hidden behind a shimmer plant. An idea began to form in her mind. "Okay, you got me," she said, raising her hands in mock surrender. "I'll come quietly." As the drones approached, Zara tensed, ready to spring into action. Just as the lead drone reached out to grab her, she ducked and rolled, using her smaller size and agility to her advantage. Before the drones could react, she had pried open the maintenance hatch and slipped inside. Unauthorized access detected. She heard the drones blare as she crawled through the narrow tunnel. Intruder alert. Zara emerged inside the xenobiology building, which was eerily quiet save for the distant sound of alarms. She made her way cautiously towards Professor Xyloth's office, her footsteps echoing in the empty hallways. As she rounded a corner, she nearly collided with a floating orb of pulsating energy, Professor Xyloth in their most condensed form. "Student Chen," the professor exclaimed, their voice a mix of relief and alarm. "What are you doing here? The entire building is under quarantine." "Professor, we need to stop this," Zara said urgently. "The whole campus has gone crazy. They think I'm some kind of biological weapon or something." Professor Xyloth's energy form flickered with concern. "I've been trying to explain to the Dean and the Board of Galactic Sciences that your cellular activity, while unusual, isn't inherently dangerous. But they're insisting on full containment until they can conduct a thorough investigation." Zara groaned in frustration. "But that could take weeks, months, even. There has to be a way to prove to them that humans aren't a threat." Before the professor could respond, a new alarm began to sound, this one deeper and more urgent than before. "Warning! Containment breach in Laboratory 7, a computerized voice announced. Unknown biological entity detected. All personnel evacuate immediately." Professor Xyloth's energy form pulsed with alarm. "Oh no, Laboratory 7. That's where we keep the experimental void spores." "Void spores?" Zara asked, a sense of dread creeping over her. "Microscopic organisms from the edges of black holes," the professor explained hurriedly. "Highly unstable, and with the potential to create micro-singularities, if they've been released." The implications hit Zara like a ton of bricks. While the entire campus was panicking about human biology, a real threat had been quietly growing right under their noses. "We have to do something," Zara said, determination replacing her earlier frustration. Professor Xyloth wavered uncertainly. "But the containment protocols, the quarantine." Zara squared her shoulders, a glint of that infamous human tenacity in her eyes. "Professor, with all due respect, we don't have time for protocols. If those void spores are as dangerous as you say, the entire university could be at risk. And right now, I think I'm the only one who can move freely without setting off more alarms." The professor's energy form flickered rapidly, their equivalent of deep thought. Finally, they seemed to come to a decision. "You're right, Student Chen. The safety of the campus must come first." Professor Xyloth's form expanded, revealing the hidden compartment from which they extracted the small device. "This is a quantum stabilizer. In theory, it should be able to neutralize the void spores, but getting close enough to use it will be extremely dangerous." Zara took the device, feeling its weight in her hand. "Danger is my middle name," she said with a grin, then paused. "Well, actually it's Mai, but you get the idea." As she turned to head towards Laboratory 7, Professor Xyloth called out, "Student Chen, Zara, be careful, and good luck." Zara nodded, a mix of determination and excitement coursing through her veins. This was her chance, not just to prove that humans weren't a threat, but to show the entire galactic community what humans were truly capable of. As she raced towards the potential disaster, alarms blaring around her, Zara couldn't help but think that this was turning out to be one hell of a first semester at Galactic University. Little did she know, her greatest challenge, and the true test of humanity's place in the cosmos, was just beginning. Unexpected crisis. The corridors of the xenobiology building were eerily silent as Zara made her way towards Laboratory 7, the quantum stabilizer clutched tightly in her hand. The usual hum of alien machinery had been replaced by the ominous wail of emergency sirens, punctuated by the occasional crackle of energy discharges, telltale signs of the void spore's growing influence. As she approached the lab, Zara could feel a strange pulling sensation, as if gravity itself was becoming unstable. Dark, swirling patterns danced across the walls, defying the laws of physics as she understood them. "Okay, Zara," she muttered to herself, "you've made it through high school chemistry. How much harder can hyperdimensional spore containment be?" She reached the entrance to Laboratory 7, only to find the door sealed shut, a pulsing force field shimmering across its surface. Next to it, a complex alien interface blinked with incomprehensible symbols. Zara groaned. Of course it couldn't be a simple keypad. Just then, her comm device crackled to life. "Student Chen." Professor Xyloth's voice came through, tinged with static. "Have you reached the lab?" "I'm here, but I can't get in," Zara replied, eyeing the alien lock warily. "Any chance you know the secret handshake for this thing?" There was a pause then. "I'm transmitting the override codes now. But be warned, once you're inside, communication may become impossible due to the quantum fluctuations." Zara swallowed hard, watching as the symbols on the interface rearranged themselves. With a hiss, the force field dissipated, and the door slid open. "Thanks, Prof," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "If I'm not back in an hour, well, maybe give it another 15 minutes before you call my parents, okay?" Before the professor could respond, Zara stepped into the lab. The door sealed shut behind her with a resounding thud. The scene inside was like something out of a surrealist nightmare. Equipment floated freely, orbiting around a central point where a swirling vortex of darkness pulsed and grew. Tendrils of void energy lashed out, warping the very fabric of space-time wherever they touched. And there, at the heart of the chaos, was a small canister labeled Void Spores, Extreme Caution. It was cracked open, dark mist seeping from its interior. "Right," Zara said, her voice sounding strangely distorted in the fluctuating air. "Step 1. Don't panic. Step 2. Figure out how to use this quantum doohickey before we all get sucked into a pocket dimension." She activated the quantum stabilizer, which hummed to life in her hands. Following the rudimentary instructions Professor Xyloth had given her, she began to edge closer to the epicenter of the disturbance. As she approached, the pull of the micro-singularities became stronger. Zara found herself having to brace against floating debris to avoid being drawn in. The quantum stabilizer vibrated violently, its readouts flashing warnings she couldn't begin to decipher. Just as she was about to reach the canister, a particularly violent surge of void energy lashed out. Zara instinctively raised her arm to shield herself, and watched in horror as the energy tendril passed right through her limb. For a moment, she felt nothing. Then, an indescribable sensation washed over her, as if every atom in her body was simultaneously freezing and burning, expanding and contracting. Zara screamed, but no sound escaped her lips. The world around her seemed to stretch and distort, reality itself bending in ways her human mind struggled to comprehend. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. Zara found herself on her knees, gasping for breath, the quantum stabilizer still clutched tightly in her trembling hands. But something was different. As she looked down at her arms, she saw faint lines of dark energy coursing beneath her skin, pulsing in time with her racing heartbeat. "What the?" she breathed, flexing her fingers experimentally. She felt strange, powerful, yet unstable, as if she was suddenly connected to the very forces trying to tear the lab apart. A crazy idea began to form in her mind. If the void spores had somehow bonded with her on a quantum level, maybe, just maybe, she could use that connection to her advantage. With renewed determination, Zara pushed herself to her feet. She raised the quantum stabilizer, feeling the energies within her resonate with the device. "All right, you interdimensional troublemakers," she said through gritted teeth. "Let's see how you like a taste of your own medicine. Concentrating hard, Zara began to channel the void energy coursing through her into the quantum stabilizer. The device's readouts went haywire, but she pressed on, pushing it to its limits and beyond. A beam of concentrated quantum energy shot from the stabilizer, connecting with the swirling vortex at the center of the lab. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, with a sound like reality itself tearing at the seams, the vortex began to collapse in on itself. Void tendrils thrashed wildly, equipment crashed to the ground, and Zara felt as if her very atoms were being pulled apart. But she held on, pouring every ounce of her newfound connection to the void into the effort. With a final, thunderous implosion, the vortex vanished. The canister of void spores snapped shut, its contents once again safely contained. Zara slumped to the ground, exhausted beyond measure. The lines of dark energy beneath her skin faded, leaving her feeling both drained and oddly exhilarated. As the emergency systems in the lab slowly came back online, Zara couldn't help but laugh. She had come to the Galactic University of Sciences hoping to learn about alien life forms. Instead, she had become something of an alien herself. The lab door slid open, revealing a contingent of security drones and a very worried-looking Professor Psylov. They froze at the threshold, taking in the scene of destruction, and the very human girl sitting calmly at its center. "Student Chen," Professor Xyloff ventured cautiously. "Are you all right?" Zara looked up at them, a weary but triumphant smile on her face. "Professor," she said, "I think I'm going to need some extra credit for this one." As the reality of what had just transpired began to sink in, Zara realized that her adventure at Galactic University was far from over. In fact, it seemed that the true challenge, explaining to the galactic community how a human had not only survived contact with void spores, but had used them to save the day, was only just beginning. But for now, as she allowed the medical drones to scan her for injuries, Zara felt a surge of pride. She had proven that humans were more than just Deathworlders to be feared. They were adaptable, resilient, and capable of rising to challenges beyond imagination. The galaxy, it seemed, had better prepare itself. Humanity was here to stay. Resolution and new understanding. In the days following the Void Spore incident, the Galactic University of Sciences was abuzz with activity of a very different kind. Gone were the panicked evacuations and blaring alarms. Instead, the air was filled with excited chatter and the hum of intense scientific inquiry. Zara found herself at the center of it all, undergoing a battery of tests and examinations that would have made even the most dedicated human scientists head spin. Researchers from every department clamored for a chance to study the human who had not only survived direct contact with void spores, but had somehow managed to control and contain them. As she sat in yet another examination chamber, this one designed to analyze quantum fluctuations in her cellular structure, Zara couldn't help but feel a mix of exhaustion and amusement. "You know," she said to the Medusan researcher waving a complex scanner over her, their tentacles writhing with excitement, "when I applied to study here, I thought I'd be the one doing the learning." The Medusan's bioluminescent patterns flickered in what Zara had come to recognize as laughter. "My dear Turan," they replied, their voice a melodious series of clicks and whistles, "you have taught us more in a few days than we have learned about your species in decades of observation." Just then, the door to the examination room slid open, revealing Professor Xyloff. The Mercurian polymorph's body was a swirl of excited blues and greens. "Student Chen," they burbled, "your presence is requested in the Grand Auditorium. The Board of Galactic Sciences has reached a decision regarding, well, everything." Zara hopped off the examination table, trying to ignore the nervous flutter in her stomach. "So, what's the verdict? Am I being shipped back to Earth in a containment bubble, or do I get to stick around and ace my xenobiology midterm?" Professor Psylloff's colors shifted to a warm orange. "Let's just say, I don't think you'll need to worry about that midterm." As they made their way to the Grand Auditorium, Zara was struck by how differently her fellow students were treating her. Where once they had given her a wide berth, now they crowded close, a cacophony of curious chirps, whistles, and electromagnetic pulses filling the air. She spotted Zook and Glix in the crowd, the former waving enthusiastically with multiple limbs, while the latter's translucent body pulsed with excited colors. Zara. Zook chittered as they approached. Is it true you can now manipulate quantum fields with your mind? Can you teach me? Glix vibrated with curiosity. I heard you absorb the essence of a black hole. Do you feel denser? Zara laughed, shaking her head. Guys, I hate to disappoint you, but I'm still just plain old human me. No quantum powers, no black hole essence. I just did what anyone would do in that situation. That's precisely the point, Miss Chen. A new voice interjected. Dean Zorlax approached, their crystalline exoskeleton gleaming under the auditorium lights. What you consider just human is, to the rest of the galactic community, nothing short of extraordinary. The dean gestured for them to enter the auditorium. Inside, Zara was met with a sight that took her breath away. Representatives from every known spacefaring species filled the vast chamber, their diverse forms creating a living tapestry of galactic life. At the center, the dean gestured for them to enter the auditorium. Inside, Zara was met with a sight that took her breath away. Representatives from every known spacefaring species filled the vast chamber, their diverse forms creating a living tapestry of galactic life. At the center, on a raised platform, stood the Board of Galactic Sciences, beings of such advanced evolution that Zara could barely comprehend their forms. As she walked down the central aisle, flanked by Professor Xyloth and Dean Zorlax, Zara felt the weight of countless alien gazes upon her. Some were curious, others admiring, and a few still tinged with a hint of fear. But overwhelmingly, she sensed a new emotion: respect. The eldest member of the board, a being of pure energy contained within an ornate metallic shell, floated forward. When they spoke, their voice resonated not just in the air, but seemed to vibrate through the very fabric of reality. Zara Chen of Earth, the elder intoned, "Step forward." On shaky legs, Zora approached the platform. She stood tall, reminding herself that she represented not just herself, but all of humanity in this moment. For centuries, the elder continued, the galactic community has viewed Earth as a death world and its inhabitants as potential threats. We observe your wars, your environmental struggles, your seemingly chaotic and often violent history. We saw beings that could survive conditions that would annihilate most life forms, with a tenacity that both impressed and terrified us. Zara swallowed hard, wondering where this was going. But in you, Zara Chen, we have seen something more. In the face of a crisis that threatened not just this institution, but potentially this entire sector of space, you displayed not just the legendary human resilience, but also courage, quick thinking, and most importantly, a willingness to sacrifice yourself for others, even those not of your own species. The elder's form pulsed with a warm light. You have shown us that we have been short-sighted. Humanity's strength is not something to be feared, but to be celebrated and learned from. Your adaptability, your creativity in the face of the unknown. These are qualities that the galactic community desperately needs as we face the ever-expanding mysteries of the universe. A ripple of agreement passed through the assembled crowd. Zara felt a lump forming in her throat, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the moment. Therefore, the elder proclaimed, it is the decision of this board that not only will Zara Chen be allowed to continue her studies at the Galactic University of Sciences, but that we will also be extending an invitation to Earth to take its rightful place in the Galactic Federation. The auditorium erupted in a cacophony of alien cheers, a sensory overload of flashing bioluminescence, electromagnetic pulses, and sounds beyond human hearing range. Zara stood stunned, trying to process the enormity of what had just happened. Professor Xyloth glided to her side, their form a kaleidoscope of joyous colors. Congratulations, Student Chen. Or should I say, Ambassador Chen. Zura blinked, finally finding her voice. Ambassador. But I'm just a student. I don't know the first thing about galactic politics or... The elder's amused chuckle cut her off, a sound like chiming crystals. My dear, you have already done more for interspecies relations than 1,000 diplomats. Your actions have opened the eyes of the galactic community to the true potential of humanity. Who better to help guide your species as it takes its first steps onto the galactic stage? As the reality of the situation sank in, Zura felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. She thought of her family back on Earth, of all the humans going about their daily lives, unaware that their place in the universe was about to change dramatically. She thought of the challenges ahead, the misunderstandings to overcome, the wonders to be discovered. But most of all, she thought of the incredible journey that had led her to this moment. From a simple biology experiment gone awry to saving the university from interdimensional spores, it had been one hell of a first semester. Zura squared her shoulders and stepped forward, ready to address the assembled galactic representatives. As she did, she felt a surge of that uniquely human combination of determination, adaptability, and hope, the very qualities that had brought her to this point. Thank you for this honor, she began, her voice steady and clear. On behalf of humanity, I accept your invitation. We have much to learn from you all, but I believe we also have much to offer. Together, we can explore the universe in ways none of us have imagined before. As applause erupted once more, Zura couldn't help but smile. The path ahead would be challenging, filled with new discoveries, potential dangers, and undoubtedly more than a few misunderstandings. But if there was one thing humans excelled at, it was facing the unknown with courage and creativity. The galaxy had no idea what it was in for. Humanity was about to make its mark on the cosmos, and Zura Chen was leading the charge. As the ceremony concluded, and Zura found herself surrounded by curious alien students and faculty members, all eager to learn more about humans, she chuckled to herself. She had come to the Galactic University of Sciences, hoping to study alien life forms. Instead, she had become the subject of the greatest xenobiology study in galactic history. But that was okay. After all, as any good scientist knew, the most exciting discoveries often came from unexpected places, and humanity, it seemed, was the galaxy's newest, most exciting frontier. The adventure was just beginning. Less than / and artifact greater than. This concludes the 5-part HFY Humanity F*** yeah story as requested. The story follows Zura Chen, a human exchange student at the Galactic University of Sciences, as she navigates misunderstandings about human biology, faces an unexpected crisis, and ultimately helps change the galaxy's perception of humanity. The story incorporates themes of human adaptability, resilience, and ingenuity, while also exploring the concept of cultural misunderstandings and the potential for growth through diversity. It maintains an engaging and inspiring tone throughout, using simple English to convey complex ideas. Is there anything specific about the story you'd like me to expand on or modify?